All right, Alexander, let's do a video here on what happened yesterday with the interview. Good Morning America, ABC News. I think it's Good Morning America, ABC News with George Stephanopoulos and Joe Biden. And my first thoughts with this interview was that this was a very well scripted, stage managed interview. I think there's no doubt about it that Stephanopoulos's questions were given to him, probably by the Biden White House, and that that Joe Biden was briefed very well in advance as to how to answer. So I think the answers that he gave with regards to Putin were pre-planned, actually, and I think that makes things even worse. To be quite honest, I think it shows how dumb, and I don't have a better word, how dumb the Biden White House is and the people around Biden. They have no understanding of foreign policy or diplomacy, because the fact that his statements and his comments were pre-planned, I think is really bad. That's my opinion. But anyway, Stephanopoulos threw his questions out there. Biden had his answers prepared. He called Putin a killer. That is a direct quote. He also said that Putin doesn't have a soul. That is a direct quote. He said that Putin will pay a price for meddling. What meddling Putin has done now, I don't know. But anyway, that's also a direct quote. And this was a diplomatic car crash for the United States. The Kremlin has responded. Putin has responded. And Putin has said, and I quote from RT, the title reads, Putin responds to Biden's insinuation that he's a killer. Says the U.S. president is likely projecting, but I wish him good health. And this is exactly what Putin said. Let me get a direct quote here. Putin said that when I was a kid, when we were arguing with each other in the playground, we used to say, whatever you say about others is what you are yourself. That's what Putin also said with regard to Biden's comments. This was talk about owning yourself, talk about an own goal, talk about a complete diplomatic blunder. This was all of those things and much worse. I mean, it's comical what happened and what Biden said, because I don't think Biden really understands what's going on at this point in time. But it's also very tragic and very serious, because I don't know how you could walk something like this back. This was a terrible, terrible diplomatic mistake. The entire world, I'm positive, is looking onto this and saying the United States has completely lost their minds. The Biden administration, the Biden White House, has completely degraded and humiliated the office of the presidency. And Peskov actually said that he doesn't believe he's seen anything like this. Peskov being the Kremlin spokesperson, he said that he has not seen anything like this, comments like this, from a United States president ever in the history of relations between the two countries. And that encompasses the times of the USSR, when tensions were very, very high. You just simply do not call the leader of a country like Russia, or any country for that matter. If you are the United States of America, you simply do not call that leader a killer. I don't care who it is. I don't care what president it is. Obama never even stooped to those levels. They would call Putin a thug. Maybe they would, call him silly names. But to call someone a killer, I think this is a blunder of epic proportions, from bordering on the silly and the dumb, but also on the serious and the tragic and everything in between. The Biden White House and the people around Biden they're showing that they are completely incompetent to engage in foreign relations or diplomacy. Russia's going to disengage. Russia's going to get closer with China. This was a disaster on so many freaking levels. Alexander, I'm stunned by it. I'm stunned at the incompetence. The incompetence, I'm stunned.
Yeah. I agree with every part of your analysis. First of all, you are absolutely right. This is a car crash. And secondly, it is a car crash that arises from a set of events which were carefully choreographed and planned. Only, I'm going to say it straightforwardly, the person who choreographed and planned this thing is a complete idiot, frankly. I mean, it's completely out of their minds what they were doing. Firstly, we had a publication of an executive summary of a report that dates all the way back to 7th January, when Donald Trump was still president of the United States. This is all a report that was cobbled together by the intelligence community, or at least by a part of the intelligence community, blaming Russia for interfering in the 2020 election and trying to allege that some of the talking points that were floating around at that time, the claims about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's dealings with Ukraine, for example, and the various claims about the election itself, all arose from Russian disinformation. Well, already we've seen some people having to walk back the Biden-Ukraine aspect of the story, admit, for example, that the laptop that was found really had nothing to do with Russia. So already that report looks shaky. But the reason this summary of that report, which, as I say, dates back to 7th January 2021, was published, was to provide the setting for this interview between Stephanopoulos and Biden. And you're absolutely right. When you go through it, when you look at the words that Stephanopoulos and Biden use with each other, it's absolutely clear that this is a carefully planned interview. Every word that is used there is carefully prepared in advance, and Stephanopoulos acts throughout the whole interview as Biden's prompter. So he talks to Stephanopoulos says to Biden, will Putin pay a price? Biden says yes. Stephanopoulos says, you said you know that Putin doesn't have a soul. And then, of course, Biden reminisces about this meeting he had with Putin in 2011, where he supposedly told Putin, you don't have a soul. By the way, we know exactly what happened during that interview, and I have great doubts about whether that exchange ever took place, but we'll put that aside for the moment. And then, of course, Stephanopoulos comes up to Biden. Remember, Biden is somebody who all reads prompts, and he says, you think he's a killer? And Biden says, oh, yes, I do. And then Stephanopoulos says, so he must pay a price. Well, he's going to pay a price, says Biden. So you can see Stephanopoulos obviously carefully prepared with his questions, always prompting Biden. Biden is there to basically agree with the talking points that Stephanopoulos is putting to him, and it all derives from this relic of a intelligence report dating back to the transition period of 2 months ago. Now, calling the leader of another country a killer is absolutely, as you rightly said, unprecedented. The Russians are totally furious about this. We've had Putin's comments, which he says, that Biden is engaging in projection, and even wishes Biden good health. Very typical Putin, by the way. Never shows emotion, tries to always put himself in a superior position to his opponents in this kind of thing, and fairly easy to do on this occasion. But you get a much better sense of how angry the Russians are from two events. The first is certain comments that were said by Dmitry Peskov, who is the Kremlin spokesman. And I'm going to read the TASS report about them. When asked whether Moscow will take steps in response, the Kremlin spokesman noted that there is nothing to be done. In other words, he's basically saying that this is finished. Responding to the question how such statements could affect bilateral relations, Peskov noted, it is perfectly clear now. He refrained from commenting on the issue in more detail. Biden has shown by his remarks, and this is what Peskov then goes on to say, that he definitely is not planning to improve ties with Russia. In future, cooperation with Washington and Moscow will proceed on that basis. Russia will analyze its approach to cooperation with the US on the issues of interest. And then Peskov went on to say that Biden's interview is a game changer In other words, that has completely changed the perspective the Russians have on their relations with the US. There's nothing to be done with the US anymore. It's a hopeless exercise. Biden isn't interested in improving relations, and they regard this interview as a game changer. And I would add, by the way, if you see commentary about this interview on the Russian media, they are absolutely livid about this. And this isn't just, the media. I understand that ordinary Russians are shocked also. But going beyond that, there's an even stronger statement that the Russians have made, and it's one which, coming from a diplomatic family, as the son of someone who served as an ambassador, you can explain to our viewers what a strong step this is. The Russians have taken the extraordinary step of withdrawing, recalling their ambassador to the US, to Moscow, for consultations. In other words, that is one of the strongest signals that one country can send to another, that it considers relations with that country at a complete dead end. And I defer to you as the son of an ambassador, as somebody from a diplomatic family, as to the implications of that. But it shows that the Russians have now completely given up on the Biden administration and want to have as little to do with it as possible. Now, all of this comes out at the same time as we've had this extraordinary meandering statement which has appeared in the website of the Atlantic Council, which looks as if it's been sourced from the administration itself, and which some people even believe, I know some people believe, might have been, if not authored by Antony Blinken, at least inspired by him, in which he says that this long thing, this long so-called new long telegram, in which it discusses at extraordinary length that the United States' main adversary is China, not Russia, and that the United States needs to find some way of changing its relations with Russia from the better and of detaching Russia from China. Well, if that is the plan, then this utter car crash of an interview and all of these steps have wrecked that policy before it even began. And the sense of anger, bafflement and shock about the Russian reaction to this in Washington is, in my opinion, shown by two things. Firstly, the fact that the American media is not really covering the story to any great extent, and there is a deafening silence about it in Europe. The Europeans are extremely upset about this, and they notice that Russian-American relations are now not just in a downward spiral, but they've hit rock bottom, and there is no sign that they're ever going to come up again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that, you're not going to say that the relations are over, because once again, you're dealing with foreign policy and diplomacy. But there's no doubt that the moves being made by Russia signal that Russia is just not going to do anything of substance or of meaning with the United States until they see a change of administration. I'm not saying they're waiting to see a change of heart or a change of mind or a change of direction. I think their statements and their actions just are signaling, you know what, we're just not going to deal with a Biden White House. And I think that encompasses Biden, Harris, all of it. I think they're just saying, we're done with these guys, period. We're done with them. Because you also got to remember that, once again, while Obama never ventured towards the he's a killer path, Russia was extremely frustrated with Obama's actions as well. But at least Obama had the sense to not throw those types of words out there. At least he had the sense to hold some sort of diplomatic etiquette when dealing with adversaries and opponents. Biden, obviously, and we don't have to get into discussing his health, but obviously Biden has no idea how to engage with diplomacy. He doesn't have that thing in the brain that makes you just put a brake on things and stop. And I think his handlers and the people that are feeding him these lines, they know it. And going back to what you said, I think definitely the idea that that maybe Blinken, if he did float it out there, that the U.S. should seek some sort of rapprochement with Russia, definitely probably irked the Newlands and the Kagans, who are in the Biden White House, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're the ones that fed Biden some of these lines. Maybe just a thought, because the neocons, the last thing they want to see is a rapprochement with Russia. But a couple more questions on this. The purpose of this is probably, you were telling me before the video, is probably more, also has a domestic component in that a lot of it is just probably meant to number one, rehabilitate Biden, paint him as a tough guy, but rehabilitate Biden. And I'll get to why. Rehabilitate his family vis-a-vis Hunter Biden, and rehabilitate the whole Burisma Ukraine thing. Once again, if anyone dares to bring up Hunter, laptop, Burisma, Biden, the video where Biden talks about the Ukraine prosecutor, the famous video that we all know about, if anyone dares to bring that up, whether it's media, whether it's a journalist, whether it's us or you or the people watching, anyone that brings it up will just now be labeled, or their hopes is that they will now just be labeled a Russian troll or a Putin puppet. So there's a domestic component there. Okay, you also make, maybe in their minds, you make Biden look tough because he's standing up to Putin as well. Maybe there's some sort of component there. So that's a domestic component. That's my first question, is there something there? And my second question deals with the international component. Is this also a way to kind of prep the media, big tech, the American public, half of the American public, I'll throw a number out there, half, that is kind of sleepwalking and believing in all of this Russian stuff for a possible conflict with Russia in Ukraine? You've done videos where you believe this is not going to happen, but you do add qualifiers. Are they prepping the public for action that they're going to take in Ukraine, in the east of Ukraine? And if they do take that action, I believe it's going to lead to a catastrophic, decisive defeat of the United States in Ukraine. But maybe you want to chime in on that as well. So I gave you a lot to think about, and yes, you could wrap up the video with all of those comments and questions.
Absolutely. Let's start with how this absurd event actually took place. First of all, I would not discount at all the possibility that the decision to publish this report from, as I said, 7th January 2021. I mean, we've only got the executive summary, I should stress, but that was partly intended to counter ideas that are coming out from other parts of the administration, which say that we need to actually try to make up some kind of rapprochement with Russia. Not, by the way, very clear ideas. I mean, if you actually read this Atlantic Council thing, it's actually a mess. But let's put that aside. But there may have been some concern from the Newlands and people like that, it's all heading in that direction. So let's quickly take steps to kill that option off by staging this bizarre and ludicrous interview with Stephanopoulos and getting the intelligence community to publish this executive summary of this report. I find that entirely plausible. It would explain a great deal, but it would also show how ideologically fixated these people are and how blind they are to reality. And it would also show, by the way, and it's a point we've discussed in previous programs, how profoundly dysfunctional this administration is, in the sense that when it tries to come up with a grand strategy to try and confront China, make up to some extent with Russia, other elements within the administration immediately act to block it and use the president in order to do so by manoeuvring him into saying these kind of things, which, frankly, anyone who understands diplomacy at all would never have let him say. The second point is, you're absolutely right. Obviously, some kind of communications between the Russians and the Americans will have to continue because they are two great powers and they need to talk to each other, because if they don't talk to each other, all sorts of things can go wrong, and at some level, some kind of communications will continue. But that will be, I think, at the lowest possible level that one can imagine, because the Russians are not going to be interested in seeking overarching agreements with the United States. They're certainly not expecting any kind of rapprochement with the United States, because whilst this administration remains in office, they calculate that these people are so viscerally hostile to them that there is really no point in negotiating with them at all. And I think, by the way, they are right. I think that if you start negotiating with people on that sort of basis, when they call your president a killer, then frankly, you are yourself setting yourself up for all kinds of problems going down the line. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, given how dysfunctional the administration is, given the push-pull that there does seem to be within parts of the administration, I have to say that I think some of the neocons in the administration would not be averse to a war in eastern Ukraine, even if they expected Ukraine to lose, and lose badly, and to be completely defeated. Because from their point of view, Ukraine itself is, if you like, almost expendable. Far more important for them is to prevent any kind of move towards a rapprochement with Russia. And if the price that has to be paid to prevent that rapprochement is a war in Ukraine, which would lead to Ukraine's defeat, but which would leave Russia, in a position where you could call Russia the bad guy again and sanction it even further, and perhaps even start putting pressure on the Europeans, to cut off Russia from SWIFT and block Nord Stream 2 and do all those sort of things. Well, those sort of people may think that's a price worth paying, especially if they're worried that there are other people in the administration who might be thinking in a different way and might be saying, well, look, we've pushed this thing with Russia as far as it can go. We can't go on like this. All we're doing is we're consolidating Russia and China's alliance, and that isn't good for us. And we need to, on the contrary, to find some way of drawing Russia away from China. So if you are somebody who is as viscerally anti-Russian as some of these people are, and as ideologically obsessed with this question as those people are, then from their point of view, faced with those sort of arguments, I can see why they might be prepared to countenance a war in eastern Ukraine, even if it was a war which they thought Ukraine would lose. So, we are dealing with some very reckless and very ruthless people. And I think their whole conduct, their whole pattern of conduct in the Middle East and elsewhere already shows that. And ultimately, where is this all going to lead? Well, we come back to your first comments. Firstly, yes, calling the president of Russia a killer does prepare at least a part of the American people for a conflict with Russia. Perhaps not a military conflict, but for some sort of conflict with Russia, demonizes Russia even further, makes wars and those sort of things involving Russia easier than it might otherwise be to sell. I think, by the way, that if that is the intention, I think that the people who think that might to some extent be overestimating the ability of this kind of language to mobilize opinion in the United States. I think most people across the United States very emphatically do not want to see the United States led into more wars, but it will consolidate some on the Democrats' side, definitely. So there is that. But in terms of the longer term geostrategic interests, those people who are saying that it will be a major problem for the United States if the relationship between Russia and China evolves into a full-blown alliance are right, and this ludicrous car crash blunder which we have now seen makes that alliance even more likely. It's not going to be more likely. I would say that it is to already a great extent a reality, and now it is going to become an even more obvious reality. Why would the Russians prefer relations with a country whose president calls their president a killer to a country like China, which treats them with courtesy and which makes none of these kind of demands on them, and which is not seeking, as the United States or some elements of the United States obviously are, to overthrow their government all the time by imposing sanctions upon them? It is a massive geostrategic blunder. Europe is horrified. There's been a meeting, by the way, in Europe recently in which there was apparently a discussion that a less confrontational policy with Moscow might be needed. And in fact, what they now see, the Europeans see, is that on the contrary, the United States is taking an even more confrontational one. A car crash describes it exactly.
So, real quick, my two comments. This was first. Let's go with Putin's. My first comment there. My comment to you is that this was an easy response from Putin. I mean, the way he responded to this, once again, I think it definitely shows that Putin's just at a level above when it comes to diplomacy and statesmanship than Biden could ever possibly wish to be. And his comment, though it was a slam dunk of a comment, I could have commented the same way because it was so easy to respond to this. It really did make the U.S. and make Biden and the office of the presidency look just absolutely childish and just embarrassing on every single level. Putin's response was easy. It was easy to predict. It was an easy response probably for them to write down and to formulate. Probably took them all but 5 minutes. But it just makes Biden and the Biden White House look just absolutely I mean, they're Bush League. I mean, they're just at such a low level compared to Putin. You know, when you look at the way he has responded to this, that's my first comment. And my question to you, what you think of his response. I think it was just an easy response for them to formulate, but it completely demolishes the Biden White House. And it leads to my second question. We are now really starting to see the damage done by having Biden, and once again on an international level, by having Biden as president and not having Trump. Because Trump, no matter what people said about him and no matter the propaganda that was floated around about Trump, Trump was an excellent diplomat, especially on a one-on-one, face-to-face level. He really did a good job for the United States on a diplomatic level, especially when dealing with superpower nations. He knew how to handle the Putins, the Xis, the Modis, all these people. He really knew how to handle them. Biden is just, I mean, he's just out of his league. In magnitudes out of his league. And Kamala Harris, and I'll finish it here, Kamala Harris is not going to be any better. So, you know, you're not going to get any relief from Kamala.
No, you're not. You're absolutely right on every single point. Firstly, you're absolutely right about Putin. I mean, going up against Putin is like always going up against the grandmaster of diplomacy. I mean, bear in mind, he's done it for a very, very long time now. He talks to world leaders regularly. He reads all the diplomatic briefs. He is an immensely experienced man. He's also a very clever one. He knows how to do diplomacy. And as you say, he would know how to respond to a comment like this without even really having to think about it. It would come almost naturally. You know, he'd come up, you know, with a comment about, you know, this is, you know, projection, and which is, of course, a way of turning it round and saying, well, actually, I'm not the killer. It's the Biden and so the Obamas and all those sort of people. It's they who are the real killers. But he doesn't actually say that, notice. He plays it round like that. And then, of course, he says, well, and I wish him good health, which is a not so subtle way, by the way, of also pointing out that, well, maybe Biden's health isn't quite as good as some people would like it to be. But you're absolutely right. For Putin, this is easy. I mean, he's had far more difficult interactions with other world leaders than this. I'm sure when he meets Xi Jinping, Putin has to be at the absolute top of his form in order to hold a negotiation with someone like Xi Jinping. By the way, he also had to be, and this is, again, I know something which people simply won't accept, many people won't accept, he had to be on top form with Donald Trump also. We've actually had a very interesting account of the kind of discussions that took place between Trump and Putin from one of the translators. He said it was like two people who chat amongst each other at a bar and exchange comments and ideas when they talk to each other in that way. That is actually extremely difficult diplomacy to do, because in that very informal setting, you can easily fall into traps which the other person might lay for you. And bear in mind, Donald Trump has experience of negotiation. He negotiated very much in his business dealings, and that is a fact. I know people always pretend otherwise. There's no doubt about it. Donald Trump knows how to deal. He does know how to negotiate. He knew how to negotiate with someone like Putin, with someone like Xi Jinping, with someone like Modi and all the others. And the fact that he was able to do it, the proof of it is that leaders around the world liked him. This is something, again, that many people in the United States don't realize. Some European leaders, notably Angela Merkel and Macron, had problems with Trump. So, by the way, did Theresa May. But generally, most leaders around the world, including Xi Jinping, including Putin, including Modi, including the various leaders of many other countries, all the Asian leaders, for example, got on with Trump. They found him a much more likable man and a far more human person than they found Barack Obama to be, for example. That is a documented fact. It is indisputable. And around the world, people will be reading about this interview that Biden gave with Stephanopoulos, and they will be shocked and horrified, and they would look at this extraordinary report that appeared in Washington from the intelligence community, which, you're quite right, is partly intended to rehabilitate Biden and to protect him from further criticism, and to say, if you bring up, the issues of Burisma and Ukraine and all that, you're simply repeating Russian, disinformation talking points, which it's obviously not true. But, that's partly what the intention of it was. But they will also be looking at this whole scenario, and they will be horrified. And the extent of the embarrassment that is felt in European capitals, especially over this issue, is shown by the way there is in fact very little commentary about this in the European media. The Europeans are dismayed by this, and the rest of the world is horrified, and before long they will be both horrified and laughing, because where people see a great power like the United States behaving in this bizarre way, mockery will inevitably, before long, start to follow. And that, I'm afraid, is something that Americans need to be ready for.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Car crash. Absolutely. All right, Alexander McCurse, thank you very much. Guys, look for us on BitChute, on Rumble, and on Odyssey. Look for our videos there. Check out Odyssey, guys. It's a really nice platform. We really like it. Looks good design, and works really well. Also, PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar, Bitcoin, EMC, Hex, Litecoin, Monero. We have all kinds of coins and all kinds of ways that you guys can donate and help this channel out. And of course, the Duran shop to pick up some merch, hoodies, mugs, sweatshirts, all kinds of great Duran gear. And let's give a shout out as well, Alexander, to Affirm Health and Beauty Products that sponsor one of our new sponsors for our videos. They have a 10% discount when you use the code Duran10. You'll find all the information down below, including a link to Affirm products, which Alexander is showing you right there, which are really amazing products for your health, your energy, your well-being. You'll find all the information down below.
Absolutely. I mean, I would point out, it's been discussed sometimes in our programs, we work incredibly hard. And these are products that provide you with a huge feeling of well-being after you use them. But it's not just that. I mean, they are. I've discussed in a previous program the fact that I've inherited a certain stiffness. My father was an athlete, but he was a very stiff man, and I am too. And that sometimes brings pains along. And I can use some of these rubs and things, and they work. They actually ease it to a remarkable degree. So they're extremely effective. We're helping you get through the aches and pains, what experiences in life, and they're very good for your general well-being. And they have well-known and well-recognized health effects, as by the way, my doctor. In fact, he recommended them. It's quite bizarre, without knowing that I was actually already using them. So by all means, please look up these products and support us and support our sponsor by doing so, and support us through our shop and through our platforms, and by subscribing to our channels and by watching our channels. And we look forward to you joining us in our next program.
Alexander Beckers, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.